billions of pounds from the Bank of England in a scheme designed to help consumers and businesses get access to credit. Now, in the final quarter of last year, lenders received a total of £9.5 billion under the scheme, but their net lending fell by £2.4 billion on the previous quarter. Those that lent more include Barclays as well as Nationwide, while Lloyds, part owned by taxpayers, lent less, as did RBS and Santander. Well, joining us now from Westminster is Chris Skinner, the chairman of the Financial Services Club, a networking group for senior executives in the financial services. Good afternoon to you. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. So we understand from the figures that the banks took £9.5 billion in the final quarter of last year, yet lending fell by £2.4 billion. What are the banks doing with the rest of the cash?
Well, there's a debate that's taking place about the demand isn't there for the lending, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And so it's more that the banks are rebalancing their balance sheets. They need to have more capital in reserve under regulatory regimes worldwide. And in particular, Lloyds and RBS, who you recently reported last week, made losses of £550 million and £5.2 billion respectively, are trying to rebalance their balance sheets. So some of the money is going probably in that direction rather than into lending.
OK, but Barclays haven't had a problem, bearing in mind they have to deal with the same rules as regards the healthiness of their finances. Why have they been able to lend more? Metro Bank is another one as well, and yet the likes of Lloyds, Santander and RBS just aren't stepping up to the plate.
Let's say RBS and Lloyds in particular have had a major reconstruction of their balance sheets where they've had huge issues. I mean, RBS wrote off £4.5 billion in debt in the last quarter alone, for example. Barclays doesn't have the same issues. They've had a much healthier situation on their balance sheet, and that's why they've been taking the funding for lending scheme from the government and using it for lending rather than for capital reserves. Santander have issues as well in Spain, so that's another reason why their loans have shrunk compared to the other banks.
OK, so is there nothing within the rules governing this scheme that you have to use the funds to lend to the public's SMEs and keep mortgages and that kind of thing? There's nothing sort of requiring banks to do it for that. They can simply just take the money and hoard it.
Well, no, the lending has to be proven to be against loans for assets such as mortgages and for small businesses.
But you're saying Lloyds and RBS aren't doing that. They're just keeping it on their balance sheet.
Well, that's the impression I have in terms of the money's been drawn down and it's not actually been given out for lending. I mean, Lloyds in particular, for example, contracted their loans by over £3 billion in the last quarter, RBS by £1 billion. So where was the money going? It has to be used according to the scheme for lending, and more than likely it's sitting on their balance sheet waiting to be lent. What they'll claim is the demand is not there, but then if you look at the small businesses in Britain, they're suffering from a lack of credit, they're suffering from a lack of loans, and that's where the money should be going, and that's where it needs to be guaranteed to go in the next quarter.
Sure, I mean, I think Barclays and Metro Bank are suggesting that argument that that SMEs don't want the money, it blows that one out of the water, frankly. Is the feeling really that Lloyds and RBS, because they're desperate to get to the point where they're in the kind of financial position where they can be floated and they can go back into private hands, that they're simply being a little bit more cautious than other banks in lending any money?
Well, certainly both of the banks are under government scrutiny, and in particular RBS is government controlled. Over 80% of the bank is owned by the taxpayer. So in that instance, the loans and the structure of the operations are being heavily scrutinised by Treasury, by government. And it may well be that to get these banks back into being fit for selling back into the private sector and giving us money back to the taxpayer, that some of the money would be put into areas that will support the balance sheet rather than necessarily supporting growing the economy.
Very interesting. Chris Skinner, chairman of the Financial Services Club. It's good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Meanwhile,